Welcome back to Poorly Educated Today in the News, where the world looks like somebody tried to run civilization off a gas station roller grill. And now we are all standing around asking why the taquitos taste like foreign policy. It is Thursday, April 16th, and America is juggling a war, a blockade, a tax code that sounds like it was named at a monster truck rally, and a health secretary who talks like he wants to fight both seed oils and reality at the same time. We got global brinkmanship, pump prices climbing like they owe money to a loan shark, and Congress doing that thing where they scream about the Constitution right after letting it get run over by a convoy. So let us get into this mess nice and proper, like a raccoon climbing into an air conditioner. Segment 1. Hormuz, headlocks, and the world's most expensive toll booth. The big mess starts in the Middle East, where the war with Iran has now spilled out of bombing runs and into a maritime chokehold that has the whole planet clenching like a man checking his bank app after buying eggs and motor oil on the same day. The blockade around Iranian shipping has turned the Persian Gulf into the world's angriest boat inspection line, with Washington basically saying, "Turn around, park it, or meet freedom the hard way." That might sound strong and decisive until you remember the global economy runs on ships squeezing through tight little waterways like a drunk uncle trying to get through a screen door at Thanksgiving. When one side wants surrender papers and the other side wants toll money, sanctions, relief, and respect, that is not a peace process. That is two guys trying to settle a bar fight by inventing new insults. And now the Strait of Hormuz is less a shipping lane and more a hostage situation with freight schedules. What makes it worse is everybody keeps acting like this is a clean, neat military chess match, when really it is more like trying to kill a hornet nest with a leaf blower and then acting surprised when the hornets remember tunnels exist. Iran's missile infrastructure got hammered, but the deeper stuff is still buried in the mountains like an angry doomsday possum with engineering credentials. So now America has the air power, Iran has the geography, Europe has a panic attack, and every oil trader on Earth is staring at a map like it is a haunted corn maze. That is the grounded part buried under the yelling. You can damage a state fast, but controlling what comes after is a whole different mud hole. We have turned one of the most important shipping choke points on Earth into a roadside argument with destroyers, and everybody is pretending that sounds sustainable. Segment 2. $4 Freedom and the Revenge of the Gas Pump. Back here at home, the gas pump is beating the brakes off every tax cut speech coming out of Washington. Folks were told there would be relief, more take-home pay, a little breathing room, maybe enough left over to replace the muffler that sounds like two skeletons tap dancing in a Folgers can. Then the fuel prices started climbing, and now every trip to the station feels like paying ransom to continue having a job. You can call it geopolitics, energy volatility, supply disruption, whatever fancy phrase makes a think tank intern feel important. But regular people call it getting robbed while standing upright. Nothing says economic optimism like putting $30 in the tank and watching the needle move like it is on federal salary. And diesel is the quiet psycho in this whole story, because that is what hauls the groceries, the lumber, the parts, the packages, and half the nonsense we buy to convince ourselves life is going great. When diesel jumps, everything else starts acting funny too, like a church deacon after 2 margaritas at a Mexican restaurant. The administration can brag about tax deductions on tips and overtime all it wants. But if the truck bringing your food costs more, and the truck bringing the truck parts costs more, and the store paying the electric bill costs more, then congratulations. Your tax break just got mugged in broad daylight by freight charges. That is the real economic joke right now. They handed people a coupon while setting the parking lot on fire. America is living in a time where the gas station sign has more power over public opinion than half the cabinet. Segment 3. One big beautiful bill and other phrases you'd only name after a steer. Now let us talk about that giant law with the name that sounds less like legislation and more like a prize bull at a county fair, the One Big Beautiful Bill. There are parts of it regular folks hear and immediately say, well, shoot. That sounds nice. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, bigger deductions, little savings accounts for babies, all of it packaged like a late-night infomercial hosted by a man pointing at a grill. And I get it. Because if you work for tips or overtime, somebody telling you Uncle Sam will back off sounds mighty appealing. But the whole thing also has that classic government trick, where one hand gives you a sandwich coupon, and the other hand uninstalls the floor beneath your kitchen. Because while some workers get relief, a whole bunch of energy credits and home efficiency help got yanked right when fuel costs started acting like they joined a cartel. That is like canceling the life jacket sale the same week you drill a hole in the boat. And then on top of that, the law tightens work requirements around food and health benefits, which politicians sell as discipline and critics call a paperwork bear trap for poor people. Beneath the jokes, there is a real tension there. The bill tries to reward work while also making basic support harder to reach for people whose lives are already stitched together with shift schedules, childcare chaos, and cars that start only when threatened. So the sales pitch is prosperity, but the public experience may be a whole lot more conditional than the slogan implies. It is a very American arrangement. Everybody gets a brochure, but only some folks get the latter. Segment 4. RFK Jr., Fruit Loops, and the Budget Chainsaw. Meanwhile, over at Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is back on Capitol Hill trying to explain how cutting billions from the public health apparatus is somehow part of making America healthier. That is a tough sell, kind of like telling somebody you are improving their barn by removing the roof so they can better appreciate airflow. Kennedy has been trying to rebrand away from the vaccine-food fight mashup and lean harder into things people broadly nod along to, like cleaner food, lower drug prices, and fewer weird chemicals in children's cereal. That is smart politics, because yelling about food dies polls a whole lot better than sounding like the internet comment section became a cabinet secretary. But Congress is not stupid enough to miss the contradiction of promising better health while dragging a budget axe through the department. This is where the whole performance gets weirdly American, because both sides are playing to things voters already feel. People do not trust giant agencies. People do not trust giant drug companies. People do not trust the government to tell them what is safe. And they also do not trust the government to stop cutting corners when things get serious. So Kennedy walks in talking about captured systems and sick kids, and Democrats walk in asking why his fix for dysfunction looks like institutional demolition with a podcast microphone. The grounded truth is that food policy, medical trust, and public health funding are all real issues, but Washington keeps packaging them like pro-wrestling feuds with spreadsheets. At this point, the hearing is basically a blender full of oat milk, ideology, and subpoena energy. Segment 5. War powers, press wars, and the Constitution on cinder blocks. Congress is also doing its periodic tradition of rediscovering war powers only after the missiles have already gone out and the maps on cable news start glowing red. Democrats are pushing resolutions trying to yank the president back toward congressional authority. Republicans are mostly holding the line, and everybody is acting shocked that modern executive power once again expanded like biscuits in a humid kitchen. The practical odds of forcing a full pullback are not great, But that is not really the whole game. The real game is making incumbents vote on war, inflation, and constitutional limits all at once, which is the political equivalent of making a man juggle snakes during a tornado warning. And because this is America, none of it happens quietly. At the same time, the White House is fighting with the press over how the Iran talks were reported, which has produced the usual spectacle of public officials threatening journalism like bad coverage is a felony. That kind of talk always lands the same way. Loud, theatrical, legally shaky, and catnip for people who think freedom of the press is great, right up until the press prints something uncomfortable. Beneath the circus, this matters, because when you are running a war, a blockade, and a shaky economic story, controlling the narrative becomes almost as important as controlling the ships. So now we have bombs overseas, hearings at home, and a domestic political climate where every institution looks at the next one like it stole catalytic converters off its truck. The Constitution is still there, but right now it feels like it is up on blocks in somebody's front yard. Segment 6. While we were looking east, the rest of the world kept breaking. And because the universe has no chill, America's fixation on Iran has created that classic problem where one fire gets all the hoses and the other fires start taking notes. Russia has kept hammering Ukraine while Washington's eyes are locked on the Gulf, which is the geopolitical version of a burglar watching you argue with a raccoon on the porch and deciding this is the perfect time to clean out the garage. That is the danger of strategic tunnel vision. When one theater eats all the oxygen, adversaries elsewhere start acting like the substitute teacher is in charge. So while the news cycle is obsessed with tankers and tolls, civilians in another war zone are still paying the price in apartment blocks and hospital corridors. Empires love pretending they can multitask forever, right up until the plates start hitting the floor. And then layered on top of all that are the smaller stories that make modern America feel like a nation powered by caffeine, unresolved trauma, and local meeting agendas. School shootings still erupt, floodwaters still trap drivers, county commissions still argue over taxes, media companies still implode over ethics messes, and somewhere out there, some executive is still trying to fix a failing brand with artificial intelligence because apparently every bad idea now comes with software. That is what makes this whole moment feel so deranged. The global order is wobbling, the domestic economy is twitching, and everyday life still expects you to answer emails, buy detergent, and remember why a chicken sandwich combo now costs the same as a spark plug. In conclusion, America right now feels like a pickup truck barreling down a gravel road with 6 dashboard warning lights on, half a tank of expensive gas, and a driver yelling that everything is under control while smoke comes out from under the hood.